The rain came without warning that afternoon, soft, steady, and quiet. On a peaceful street lined with aging maple trees and freshly mowed lawns, the world had slowed to a gentle rhythm. Inside the Carson household, it was just another rainy Tuesday. Anna Carson, 7 years old, stood by the living room window in her red socks, watching water drip down the glass like tiny rivers. Her nose was pressed against the cold pane when she saw it, a small figure huddled by the neighbor's trash cans. She squinted. It was a cat, thin, soaked, shivering, completely alone. Her breath fogged the glass as her heart jumped. She turned on her heels and called out, "Mom, there's a cat outside." Her mother, Rachel, was folding laundry in the next room. "Leave it, honey. It probably belongs to someone." "No, Mom, it's cold and it looks hungry." Rachel sighed. With 3 kids, a full-time job, and a husband who was rarely home before 8, the last thing she wanted was to deal with a stray animal. "We can't take in every cat that shows up, sweetie." But when she peeked out the window a few minutes later, she saw it too. Alone. Still. And something in her chest ached. Rachel gave in sooner than she expected. 15 minutes later, the cat sat wrapped in a soft blue towel on the kitchen floor. It didn't struggle, didn't hiss. It just sat there, blinking slowly, like it was too tired to resist kindness. Anna beamed with pride, offering it tiny bites of chicken from her plate. "He's not scared of me," she said softly. "He likes me." Rachel crouched down. "Don't get too attached, Anna. If he has an owner, we'll need to find them." Anna nodded seriously, petting the cat's damp fur. "Can we keep him just until then?" "We'll see." Anna smiled. "I want to call him Oliver." The name stuck immediately. That night, after the kids had gone to bed and the house was finally still, Rachel sat alone at the kitchen table. Oliver had curled up on a folded towel in the laundry room, barely moving except to eat. Something about the cat unnerved her, though she couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the way he never made a sound, or how his eyes never blinked when she looked at him, just stared, calm and unreadable. She sighed. It had been a long year. Her husband, Mark, worked late more often than not. Their oldest son, Lucas, had started pulling away. More time in his room, headphones always on. And Anna, sweet, sensitive Anna, had started waking at night with nightmares again, the kind she hadn't had since. Rachel stopped that thought. She wasn't ready to go back there. Not yet. By the third day, Oliver was part of the household. He followed Anna from room to room like a shadow. He slept at the foot of her bed. He sat beside her when she read. She even started talking to him as if he understood everything she said. And oddly, it sometimes felt like he did. "Oliver knows I'm sad sometimes," Anna whispered to Rachel one morning while brushing her teeth. "He sits on my lap until I stop thinking about it." Rachel looked at her in the mirror. "Sad about what, baby?" Anna shrugged. "Just stuff." Rachel didn't press. She never did when Anna got like this. But later that night, when she saw Oliver sitting in the hallway outside Anna's room, back straight, eyes wide, perfectly still, something about it made her uneasy again. He looked less like a pet and more like a guard. The next Saturday, Mark finally had a day off. They had planned a family walk and maybe lunch in town, but the rain returned, so instead they packed into the car for errands. Anna begged to bring Oliver, but Rachel gently said no. "He'll be okay at home, just for a little while." On their way back, Rachel noticed a small, weathered poster on the bulletin board outside the corner store. "Missing cat. Reward." The picture showed a thin gray and white tabby, yellow eyes, tense posture. The resemblance was uncanny. She stared at the number written below the photo. Her fingers itched to call, but something made her hesitate. She folded the poster and slid it into her purse, not telling anyone. Not yet. That night, Rachel woke up to the sound of soft footsteps in the hallway. She glanced at the clock. 2:13 a.m. Mark was fast asleep beside her. Frowning, she slipped out of bed and opened the bedroom door. The hallway was empty, but there, halfway between the bedrooms, sat Oliver, perfectly still, facing Anna's door. His tail flicked once, then went still. His eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight coming through the window. Rachel walked quietly over and bent down. "What are you doing, huh?" she whispered. Oliver didn't move, just stared at the door as if listening. Then a soft noise came from inside Anna's room, a quiet sob. Rachel's heart twisted. She gently pushed the door open. Anna was sitting up in bed, eyes red, hugging her knees. "Baby, what's wrong?" Anna looked at her but didn't answer. Instead, she glanced down. Oliver had slipped into the room and was now curled up beside her. "I had the dream again," Anna said softly. Rachel sat on the edge of the bed. "The one with the water?" Anna nodded. "But this time it wasn't me. It was a little boy. He was crying, and then he disappeared." Rachel's breath caught. A memory stirred in the back of her mind, a sharp, painful one. She forced herself to stay calm. "It's just a dream," she whispered. But Oliver lifted his head slowly, and his golden eyes said otherwise. The next day, Rachel couldn't stop thinking about the dream. She hadn't told Anna what it reminded her of. She hadn't told anyone, not even Mark. But 5 years ago, before Anna was born, they had lost a baby. Stillborn. A boy. It had nearly broken her. She remembered holding the tiny blanket, the name they never used, the funeral no one talked about. They never told their kids. They thought, what was the point? But now Anna was dreaming about a little boy disappearing underwater, crying. How could she know? Rachel sat in her parked car outside the grocery store, hands trembling on the steering wheel, unable to get out. At home, Oliver was sleeping on the windowsill, but his ears twitched the moment she walked in. Lucas, their 13-year-old son, usually didn't pay much attention to Anna, or anything else lately. But that evening, he knocked on his mother's door. "Mom?" Rachel looked up from her laptop. "Yeah?" Lucas hesitated. "Do you think it's weird how that cat follows Anna everywhere?" Rachel blinked. "You too?" Lucas leaned against the doorway. "I woke up last night and he was just sitting at my door, like watching me. I got up to go to the bathroom and he followed me halfway, then stopped. It was like he knew I wasn't the one he was looking for." Rachel stared at him. Lucas shrugged. "It's creepy, that's all I'm saying." Then he turned and walked away. Rachel sat still for a long time after. She couldn't ignore it anymore. Rachel pulled the crumpled missing poster from her purse and stared at the number again. Her thumb hovered over her phone's dial pad. She wasn't sure why she was so hesitant. Maybe it was the way Oliver looked at Anna, or the way he curled up beside her each night like a protective guardian. Maybe it was the nightmares, or how Anna seemed more at peace with him around. She dialed. A man answered. His voice was older, a little tired. "Hello? Hi, I'm calling about a missing cat. I saw your poster." There was a pause. "You found him?" "I think so. He's been staying with us. My daughter brought him in." "What does he look like?" Rachel described him. Another pause. Then, "That's him." She hesitated. "Can I ask, what's his name?" The man cleared his throat. His name was Milo. He went missing a year ago. He was special." Rachel frowned. "Special how?" The man's voice dropped to a whisper. "He belonged to my grandson. The boy died. After that, the cat just vanished." A chill ran through Rachel's spine. She hung up before she could say anything else. That night, after the kids were asleep, Rachel told Mark everything about the nightmares, the poster, the phone call. Mark listened in silence, arms folded, jaw tight. "You think this cat is connected to the baby?" "I don't know," Rachel said, "but Anna described a little boy in her dreams, and the cat, Oliver or Milo, whatever. He watches her like he knows her, like he's guarding her." Mark rubbed his face. "Rach, you're exhausted. You're connecting things that aren't there." "Maybe." But then she pulled out the missing poster and laid it in front of him. Mark stared at it, and for the first time his expression cracked, because the boy in the photo, standing beside Milo, looked almost exactly like what Anna had described in her dream. Sunday afternoon brought a rare calm. The rain had stopped, and soft sunlight filtered through the windows. Rachel, feeling the weight of the week, decided to organize a few old photo boxes they kept in the garage. She thought a bit of nostalgia might clear her head. She sifted through envelopes of school portraits, birthday snapshots, and vacation photos. So many smiling faces, so many forgotten moments. And then she paused. She held a photo she didn't recognize. It was a picture of Anna, maybe 5 years old, sitting in the backyard under the maple tree. There was a gray cat beside her, but they hadn't had a cat back then. She turned the photo over. No date, no writing. Rachel blinked. The fur on the cat, the coloring, the posture. It looked exactly like Oliver. But this photo was at least 2 years old. That night, Rachel sat beside Anna's bed, gently stroking her daughter's hair. "Sweetie," she asked softly, "do you remember when you were really little? Before we had Oliver? Did you ever play with a cat in the yard?" Anna blinked sleepily. "I don't think so." Rachel hesitated. "But what if I showed you a picture?" Anna turned to face her mom, her small brow furrowed. "Is it of the boy again?" Rachel blinked. "What boy?" Anna's voice was quiet. "The one in my dreams. He had a cat too." Rachel tried to stay calm. "Did he say his name?" Anna shook her head. "Number, but the cat had the same name." Rachel swallowed. "Oliver?" "No," Anna whispered. "Milo." The room fell silent. Rachel looked at the cat curled up at the foot of the bed, and for the first time she noticed something very faint. On the inside of his ear, hidden in the fur, a tiny metal tag, almost invisible. She leaned in. Etched into the metal was one word: Milo. Mark had spent the last few days trying to brush off Rachel's concerns, but the truth was, he was disturbed too. And that night, while everyone slept, he got up for water. He paused outside Anna's room. The door was open slightly. Inside, Anna was sound asleep. Oliver, Milo, was curled at her side, and standing near the window, bathed in the silver light of the moon, was a figure, small, still, a child. Mark froze, every muscle in his body locked. Then the figure turned. It was a little boy, wearing clothes from another time, old-fashioned, pale. His eyes were dark, wide, and familiar. Then, in a blink, he was gone. Mark stood in the hallway, gripping the door frame for balance. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. On Monday afternoon, Rachel was home alone when the doorbell rang. At the door stood an older man, weathered, eyes heavy with something she couldn't name. "Mrs. Carson?" he asked softly. She nodded. "I'm Milo's original owner, from the poster. You called a few days ago." Rachel hesitated, unsure whether to invite him in. "I just wanted to see him one last time," the man added. She nodded, slowly stepping aside. Milo was sitting in the hallway, watching silently. The man knelt down and held out his hand. "Milo," he whispered. The cat blinked, but didn't move. "That's him," the man said. "I'd know those eyes anywhere." He looked up at Rachel. "My grandson passed away in his sleep. They were inseparable. After the funeral, Milo just disappeared. We searched everywhere." Rachel was quiet. "I thought maybe he followed him in some way." His voice cracked. "But now I think maybe he stayed behind, looking for someone else to protect." He stood, nodding toward the hallway. "She's the reason he stayed, isn't she?" Rachel couldn't speak. The man gently touched the doorframe. "You keep him. He's already made his choice." Then he turned and left, disappearing into the fog. That night, the family sat together at dinner for the first time in a long while. It was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Lucas wasn't wearing his headphones. Anna was smiling. Mark held Rachel's hand under the table. Milo lay at Anna's feet, purring gently. Things felt whole, but as they cleared the plates, Lucas spoke up. "Do you think he's like a ghost?" Rachel looked at him. "Milo?" Lucas nodded. "Or the boy? Both." No one spoke for a moment. Then Anna said softly, "He's not a ghost." Rachel tilted her head. "Then what is he?" Anna looked at Milo. The cat opened his eyes and blinked slowly. "He's a memory," she said, and somehow that felt right. Later that week, Rachel sat in the attic, sorting through old boxes. She didn't know why she'd gone up there, maybe instinct, maybe something deeper. She opened a dusty box labeled Anna Baby and sifted through soft blankets and hospital papers. Then she spotted a manila envelope wedged in the corner. Inside was a death certificate. Benjamin Carson stillborn, March 27th, 2013. Her breath caught. They had never told the kids. They barely spoke his name themselves. Rachel stared at the printed letters until her vision blurred. She had pushed the grief so far down. For so long, she'd convinced herself it had faded. But now, a little boy was visiting their daughter in dreams, a boy with sad eyes, a boy with a cat, and a cat named Milo had come to them, uninvited, and stayed. Rachel wept quietly in the attic, the papers crumpling in her lap. Lucas came home from school and found Milo waiting on the porch, tail twitching. "Hey, weirdo," he muttered, but gave the cat a scratch behind the ears. That night, as he passed Anna's room, he paused. The door was open. Anna was drawing. Lucas stepped in, glancing at her notebook. She had sketched a boy, small with messy hair and a striped shirt. "Who's that?" he asked. "My brother," she said simply. Lucas froze. "You don't have a brother." Anna didn't look up. "I do. I just never met him." Lucas swallowed. "How do you know what he looks like?" Anna tapped her pencil. "I don't. He told me." Lucas sat on the floor across from her. "In your dream?" Anna nodded, and for the first time in a long time, they just sat there, quietly, together. That night, a thunderstorm swept through town, violent and loud. Trees bent in the wind, rain lashed the windows. Anna woke with a start. Lightning lit her room in quick flashes. Milo wasn't at the foot of the bed. She sat up. "Milo?" A low growl echoed from the hallway. She crept out of bed and opened the door. Milo stood near the top of the stairs, facing the front door. His fur was bristling, his eyes glowing in the dark. Anna stepped closer, and then, for just a moment, she saw him again. The boy, standing just inside the door, soaking wet, barefoot, silent. Anna didn't scream. She just watched. The boy raised one hand, not to wave, to point, past her, behind her. Anna turned. Rachel stood at the end of the hallway, pale, frozen. She had seen it too. The storm passed by morning. The house was quiet again, but the silence had changed. Over breakfast, Rachel sat with Mark and told him everything. The certificate, the attic, the boy's name. Mark stared at his coffee mug. "We never said his name in this house," he murmured. Rachel nodded. But Anna knew it. Mark looked up at her, eyes filled with something she hadn't seen in a long time, grief and release. "I think," Rachel whispered, "he wanted us to remember him, and Milo was how he came back." Mark said nothing for a while, then finally, "We owe him that." He stood, walked to the living room, and called for the kids. When Anna and Lucas sat on the couch, Mark took a breath. "I want to tell you a story," he said, and for the first time they spoke of Benjamin. The next weekend, the family went to the cemetery. It was gray but peaceful. They brought flowers. Rachel brought the drawing Anna had made. They found the small flat stone marker that hadn't been visited in years. Benjamin Carson, forever loved Anna, knelt and placed the drawing gently on the grass. "Hi, Benny," she whispered. "Thank you for sending Milo." Milo sat beside her, tail curled around his paws, perfectly still. The family stood in silence, arms around each other. A breeze passed through the trees. A bird sang nearby, and Rachel felt something shift, not disappear, but soften. That night, Milo didn't sleep on Anna's bed. He sat by the window instead, watching the stars. When Rachel checked on him, she found him there, perfectly calm. He blinked slowly at her. She knelt beside him. "You don't have to stay," she whispered. Milo flicked his tail once, then looked up at the ceiling, and for the first time since he arrived, he meowed, just once. Then he closed his eyes. When morning came, Milo was gone. The windows were closed, the doors were locked, but the blanket where he used to sleep was warm. 2 weeks had passed. Life at the Carson home had quietly settled into something softer, slower. The storm had moved on, outside and within. Anna still looked for Milo some mornings. She would glance at the rug by her bed or whistle at the back door. But she didn't cry. She smiled, because somehow she knew he was okay. Lucas had begun helping more around the house. He spent less time in his room and more time in the living room, sometimes even reading to Anna while she colored. And Mark and Rachel, well, they had begun to remember Benjamin in small ways. A photograph on the shelf, a candle on his birthday, a name that no longer brought only pain. Then, one quiet Saturday, as Anna played in the yard, a neighbor's dog wandered through the open gate, a golden retriever with kind eyes and a wagging tail. He trotted right up to Anna, licked her hand, and sat beside her like they'd known each other forever. She laughed. Rachel watched from the porch. "Can we keep him?" Anna called out. Rachel smiled softly. "We'll see." Late that night, Rachel sat alone at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. The house was dark and still, the kind of stillness that felt earned. She got up, walked quietly down the hall, and stepped into Anna's room. Her daughter was asleep, curled peacefully beneath her blankets. And there, by the window, on the old towel that still lay folded on the sill, was an indentation, like the weight of a cat still resting there. Rachel didn't move. She just stood there, watching the empty space where Milo used to sit. "Thank you," she whispered. The wind stirred gently outside, and in that moment she felt it. Not sadness, not longing, but something close to peace, because not all goodbyes are forever. Some stay behind. to heal what was lost.